Okay, we are back and continuing with the hands. There was a couple of questions that rolled in from Mr. Wolf Knightley. Said, one thing I didn't get in the last lesson was why we were spending so much time on cleaning up the topology so often, trying to get it just so, and then going straight from that into doing things that completely mess it up. I spent so much time trying to fix things that I would just go and break right away. It seemed a really inefficient use of time. Is there a reason for this? Yes, there is a reason for this. The reason is that while working, I prefer to keep the topology as clean as I can while working. Now, it just so happens that sometimes the next thing I need to do will make a disturbance in that topology, but that's not always the case. When it is, then I need to go back and fix it again. But I think you're going to find that modeling is often that kind of a procedure. We're going to be doing a lot of back and forth. Now, honestly, when we were doing the torso in the last class, I really wasn't happy with how a lot of things took place down in here. It just didn't work out very well. As a matter of fact, in the other class, in the Thursday class of 2 weeks ago now, because there was that week off, I was a lot more satisfied with how the geometry turned out there. And the funny side effect of the whole thing was that class was actually over a lot more quickly. The whole model just went much more quickly along in the process. It's just one of those things. Sometimes you get it just right the first time. Sometimes you have to work with the verts for a little bit longer. Now, I think it's a good idea to keep flow and topology in mind, because I believe that if you don't, you can really easily fall into the habit of saying, well, I'll just clean it all up later. So I'll go ahead and add this, and I'll add this, and I'll work on this, and I'll go ahead and add this. And then you find yourself having to literally sit down and tweak out for hours and hours and hours, a little bit at a time, when if you just done a little bit of tweaking along the way, you'd be closer to where you need to be. I think you're going to find in a lot of cases that there's going to be about the same amount of tweaking. It's going to get shorter as you get further and further into your modeling career. You'll get more and more used to it. But in my experience, if you can just kind of keep things relatively tidy all along the way, then the wrap-up of your model goes much more quickly than just saying, oh, you know what, why worry about cleaning up the topology when I can just go ahead and slap the rest of the model together and clean it all up later. And like I said, in a lot of cases when you're working, you won't end up breaking your topology. It just so happens that a few of the times when I was working Tuesday before last, then I would. It's not always the case, and you don't always know. I will break off on tangents sometimes and be like, let's go work on this, or pull out a vertex and realize, that's not doing exactly what I wanted to do. It's a lot like sculpting in clay in that sense. At least that's the mentality that I take, where sometimes I didn't put enough clay in that one part, sometimes I put a little much, and I need to shave it off. It's the same thing. It's a little bit of a back and forth thing. Another question was, I had a problem when I tried to do the changes that you were doing to make the top of the hip bones, but no matter how much I tried or how long I tried it, it always ended up looking like I did nothing with subdivision and smoothing on. I couldn't get it to look like yours at all. Well, the little curvature that I added with the top of the hip bones is really going to be felt more than seen anyway. So if you're trying to make them really, really protrude, then you're probably doing, really yanking them out, and I would advise against that. Let it be something very subtle in the flow of the geometry, because you will catch it later on once, as you roll across like a specular highlight. You can just start to see there's a little bit of hip bone suggested there, but not really protruding out very far. Now, if you wanted it to protrude, in this case, I would add a couple of more edges in and, kind of push them in around to make that one feature stand out a little bit more. I might even change the entire direction of the topology just to make that a little more pronounced. But in this case, with the model that is this simple, it's just not necessary. Okay, so now back over here. Let's just do this. I'll hit B. I'm going to grab all these guys and just hit H and see if we can hide these guys and just turn off the smooth for now. Now, do I have two different models going, or... No, I don't. Okay. There we go. So it's when I hit Z I can see through that. Well, that's fun. Okay, so let's continue on. The next thing that I want to tackle is going to be the thumb of our character. Now, we have a lot of cleanup we can do with the fingers. You'll notice I've got some bands of topology that are kind of zigzaggy and not all that nice and neat just yet. We can take care of that a little bit later. For now, what I want to do, as I said, is focus kind of on the thumb area. And when I do this, usually the way I'll handle it is I'm going to pull these edges back a little bit further. So let's just grab.
Well, this is a kind of something of a gotcha area for beginners.
It can be.
In terms of where exactly the thumb attaches.
Well, I've kind of run into that too, especially with folks who are just kind of getting started. A lot of folks will want to make their thumb come out of the side of the hand. And you can do that, but I feel like you're going to end up pulling a lot of vertices around the front of the hand just to get things to line up.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. In real life, it genuinely doesn't do that.
Well, it doesn't. Your thumb actually attaches at more of an angle to the direction of your palm. So usually what I will do when I'm building a hand in the manner that we've done so far is I'll pull it out of these two faces. Now before I actually go through the process of doing that, let me switch back over to the front view, let me switch over to wire for just a moment and grab some vertices. I'm going to expand the surface area of that one face and kind of slide some of these vertices over just a little bit. So I just have a little bit more surface area to pull out a thumb. Switch over to faces, grab these two guys, and really, there's a couple of different ways you can go about this. Just like with the fingers before, you can extrude all the way to the end and then resort to adding some edge loops. You can go back and forth with extrude a little, extrude a little, extrude a little. So what I'm going to do is just hit E, and we'll just pull out to about the base of the thumb. Now we can see that a lot better from the side view than we can from the front, but it's one of those things where no matter what direction, since we only have two orthographic views, we're not going to be able to get a really, really solid indication of where the thumb is. So I'm just going to keep the geometry very simple, and we will begin just by moving these guys around here. Now the back of the thumb is going to come quite a bit more forward, like so. And we'll pull these back. So I'm really just kind of making a stump, sort of what you would get if you sliced your thumb off. Now, one thing that I often do, and sometimes I have to re-explain it often to myself, is I will often have an extra edge that runs right down the center of the thumb. It'd almost be like if I had an extra edge running down the tips of the fingers. And the reason is primarily just so that I can get away with creating a little more rounding in the palm. If it became a real problem, I could anchor it off somewhere along the way, but usually I don't. Usually I'll just let it run all the way around the tip of the thumb. Yes, Gavin?
I was going to say, you're talking a lateral loop. Yeah, that one.
Yeah, that one. Just run like so, and that'll give me four faces at the very tip of the finger. But so I'm going to grab all of these guys once again. Now, actually, before I do that, let me make a few changes here. I'm going to switch over to vertices. Totally changed my mind, which I'm just going to say is my prerogative. Let's frame up on this guy. Go back to perspective view to make it a little bit easier to see kind of where I am and what I'm doing. And I'll grab my manipulator and pull these out a little bit. You can also go ahead and pull these inside just a little and start to adjust kind of that rounding. Pull everything forward, because obviously there's a lot more forward slant toward the back of your thumb than there is toward the front. Just pull that out a little bit for some thickness. Okay. And let's see here. Let me pull these. I guess I'll just pull these back temporarily, because I'm trying to get right at, well, hang on. I'm trying to basically put these faces right about here. So let's just do that. Her hand is tilted a little differently than I thought it was. Okay. And I'll go ahead and clean that up just a little bit so it's not quite as nasty. Pull that out for some rounding. Create some rounding at the back of the hand. Okay. Grab these 4 faces. And we'll just extrude, and I'll just immediately kind of move them close to where I need them to be, scale them down a little bit. This is generally how a lot of my thumbs start out. They usually start out looking pretty gross. Let's grab, let's grab this edge loop here and pull it along, do a little bit of upward scaling. I'm going to do a lot of tweaking to it anyway. Okay, so you can see how it's starting to look vaguely like a thumb, but the important thing to get across here is you see how it's actually coming out of the bottom and the side of the hand. It's not coming straight out the side, and that will help your hands behave much more realistically. Now, I'm looking at my own hand, and it's still difficult to see how that looks like a thumb. Must get annoying. Well, I don't know. I think that may just kind of work on the limits of how you look at it. So, I mean, to me, this is actually starting to look like a thumb. We can take a poll. Is it starting to look like a thumb to anybody?
Yeah. I mean, looks like my thumb.
Now, I mean, it's a little thick in some areas, it's a little thin in others, but that's just going to be one of those things. This is where you start to work with the vertices that you have. Now, the topology we've created already kind of suggests that these faces here and here become the top of the thumb. Obviously, that's not really the way your thumb works. Your thumbnail is probably not that far rotated back. So oftentimes what I will do is I'll just rotate the whole thing forward, which if I kind of face right into it, I can tap R twice and just kind of spin everything, but it would probably help if I grabbed all the faces around that first. Kind of face right into it, tap R twice, and just kind of rotate everything forward just a little bit. And then really it's just go back to pushing and pulling a whole bunch of vertices. Now if this process of constantly pushing and pulling vertices is starting to drag you down, go take a deep breath and don't complain. That's kind of what you're going to be doing for a while, especially when you start getting into modeling out characters. Because I'm keeping things very simple, mostly just for academic purposes, but you can really spend a lot of time working on stuff like this. Okay, so what we've got here is the first edge that I'm working on. I'm actually going to pull it back slightly. This is going to be kind of where that first knuckle is coming out from your palm. It's kind of like where that skin between your hand and your thumb connect. Which, by the way, that's still very, very thick. On some characters, like in this case, you know, we're making a character that is essentially going to be wearing gloves, so it's not that big of a deal. If you want this flesh to have a little more of that membranous kind of feel to it, don't be afraid to kind of thin this out. And then you can run extra edges kind of around it to help get the skin to pucker just right. But we're not going to be going that high res with the character. So I'll thin it out a little bit, but not too terribly much. Okay, so let's go ahead and add another edge in here. And this is going to be where that second knuckle is. And I'm going to rotate this forward a little bit and wiggle it around just, you know, very, very slightly, and then really it's just back to the same game of tweaking more vertices. Now, this particular edge that I'm working on right this moment, this is kind of like if you were to draw a line right around the center of your knuckle. So don't try to worry about making things too thin. We're going to have to add internal edges in between these edges. So in between these loops, say like here and here, and those will start to thin the thumb out. Right now the thumb does look a little bit thick, but that's okay. Don't stress that. I might end up rotating that back just a little more. Let me see here. Let me switch over to faces. And if I tap the O key, not Shift O, thank you. Oh, okay, don't respond to the O key. There's always that. Alright, connected, whatever.
Old time.
Yeah. Let me rotate this back and see how much I'm actually manipulating the hand, because I don't want to get so far out that the palm is really starting to update too much. But somewhere along here, and a neat trick you can use, if you can wiggle your viewport around just right, is you can actually look down this kind of like the same way you would your hand, and then just see where those faces are pointed on your real hand. And you can rotate them that way, which is very nifty. Because it turns out you got really great reference for this attached to the ends of your wrists. I didn't mean to do that. Let's turn off proportional editing. Okay, so now we can start to really worry about the overall shape of the thumb. I feel compelled to kind of check my image planes once more. So let's grab the tips of the thumb here, and I'll just go wireframe for just a moment. I'll move these out, jump over to vertices. We can add some thickness there. Clean that shape up a little bit. And then let's jump to the side view, and that's close, just maybe kind of thin things out. Obviously the tip of the thumb did look a little bit extreme, so we'll pull that in. Start to pull these in as well. Okay. Alright, so now from here, let's add a little bit more beefiness there. And I want to clean up the shape of the tip of the thumb a little bit, because it's kind of getting a little bit slanted off toward one side, and thumbs tend not to do that. At least mine doesn't, so I'm going to kind of model it slightly after my thumb. Maybe you nicked yours with a, I don't know, lawnmower blade at one point, and yours does that. Okay. Alright, so now let's go ahead and start adding some edges for further shaping. So let's hit Control R, and I'll just drop one edge in here and just scale it down a little bit. And really that's the whole point of that edge, is just to add a little bit of tapering to the thumb and tweak these vertices sort of on the underside of it. I find there's a little bit more rounding at the tips of my thumb than I'm seeing there, so I'll pull that around. Bring this up a little bit closer to the tip, like so. I also look like I need to kind of straighten this edge a little, so I'll just look through the mesh, clean that up slightly. Let's add one more edge in here. And again, I'll just start off with a general scale, and then go through and start working vertices from that point.
Annie and Lawrence, having been made presenters, you need to switch your chat panel back over to send question to staff. They don't show up in the same place otherwise.
Oh yeah, please make sure that you...
I only just noticed your comments.
Yeah, we're not ignoring you. Just make sure you send your questions back over to the staff, and then I'll be able to see that. Once I've seen your screen, you're a presenter in the software, and so you have a slightly different method that you need to do the first couple of times you ask questions. I think after that, it's just fine, though.
Yeah, it's just
that first time.
Drop down beneath the text entry field that you need to switch over.
Okay. Now, in this direction, I probably don't need too much indentation. But we can start to clean it up in here. I'm still going to do the same thing I did with knuckles before, where I'm going to have two edges kind of surrounding the knuckles. But I guess it'd probably be a good idea to allow everyone to have a moment for a ready check. So let's go ahead and just do that.
It's not like Steve to just disappear.
Well, you know, you have just started talking when I unpaused. Thanks a lot for that. All right, so so we're back.
You're welcome.
Yes, I'm gonna just do a couple more little tweaky tweaks. Nothing major. We've got a pretty good start on where I want to be here, in terms of what I want all this to look like. There are a few things, though, that need adjustment. For instance, we have all kinds of things on the fingers we can clean up, and while I don't want to get like too terribly buried in tweaks, I mean, sometimes that's what you got to do, right? So all of these really slanty edges I want to kind of clean up a little, so that at least most of my edges are primarily perpendicular to the angle of the finger itself. I mean, if they're not perfect, that's okay, but they need to be at least mostly perpendicular, so that when I go to animate the fingers flexing, then I don't get really weird deformation. So we'll just do a little kind of tug of war on each side. We'll bend one way, pull the other one back the other way, and somewhere in the middle, you'll figure it out. Which is almost exactly one of the last lines spoken in the film Demolition Man. Ooh. Strange how your brain pulls out strange factoids like that while you're talking. That wasn't that bad of a movie. I actually kind of enjoyed it. But it is one of those films where I think you kind of have to turn your brain off and just let yourself enjoy it. And if you start really trying to overly critique every little aspect of cheesiness, you're just going to get frustrated. It's just, you know, typical pulp action movie. You can just go with it. Now, Judge Dredd, on the other hand, was just crap from one end to the other.
It was a bit of a letdown, frankly.
Alright, I don't want to pull these too far forward, but I'm going to give them a little bit more room toward the back of the hand, because for my next trick, I'm going to drop an edge right along through here. And, you know, all things being equal, I would probably want to, well, in a lot of cases I'd probably just anchor this off and make a triangle, but then Gav might have some sort of strange heart attack, like...
Well, no, because, I mean, I'm already anticipating the whole counting the edges and...
Yeah.
On the wrist and working around that way.
So that'll be easy enough.
Sneak a triangle through.
Well, it'll be pretty easy, considering that we still don't have the head created. So right now we can cheat.
That you can run up into the neck.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about that from way back at the beginning, when there was that whole huge debacle over 8 and 6 not being the same number. But I wondered whether you had been...
Hush. That's fine. 8 and 6 are not the same number. They just sometimes look like it. You know, they do have a lot in common. I feel like if the 6 would just grow a little bit more at that little part that curls around at the top, it'd look a whole lot more like an 8. Maybe they're close relatives. Really, the only thing between them is 7, isn't it? Go ahead, just take that and run with it.
Yeah, I was trying. Nowhere to go. Up against a wall on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
6 would be 7 if... No, 6 would be 8 if 7 would just get out from between them. Alright, so... You guys see I'm just kind of making a few random vertex tweaks, not tweets, because, yeah, this is not social networking class. Now...
Move to vertex, lol.
Yeah, lol. Okay, now here's kind of this is sort of an optional thing. I mean, if you look at your hand, and it's starting to look pretty good, but right where the fingers attach is still looking kind of bland. One of the things that I will do to fix problems like this, and this is one of those things where you kind of have to decide if you want to handle this, but I will do a little extrusion here. Now, I could have done an inset just as well, just so you know, but a tiny little extrusion, and then scale it down. And then you get an extra edge here, if I kind of focus up on it, that I can pull out just a little. And now if you take a look at my smooth, it's giving a lot more of a feel of a knuckle. The only thing is you'll probably have to switch over to vertices and kind of stretch that back a little. Now, it's not super duper mega anatomically correct. I'll be the first one to admit that. You don't have like the bone running down the length of the palm. If you wanted to create that, though, you could just run that extrusion all the way back to about here or here and let it stop there. And then you can have nice indentations for the finger bones. The reason I'm not doing that is that if I was going to go that far, I would then feel somehow compelled to start worrying about things like veins in the hand, which I'm not going to do. And generally I wouldn't do unless I was using a bump map, but I've had to do them before. ZBrush is a nice way to do it.
And actually that indentation, if you were modelling this at a super high-res close-up of a hand, that's a good way to go about all of the knuckles, really. Yeah. That inset and scale thing.
Mm-hmm. Which, again, I just do a little bit of an extrusion, because I'm probably going to have to pull out a little anyway. And we'll go ahead and scale that down.
And actually, yeah, you were talking about the sort of anatomical anomalies of it. If you had the edge running down the length of the fingers and around,
yeah,
then you would be able to, this would work very well, and you could draw it back along that edge.
Right. I mean, we could probably do that. We could probably create edges that ran all the way down the fingers and maybe just anchor them off somewhere along the palm and somewhere maybe down through here, but I'm not gonna.
No. It's just sort of throwing it out there, really.
Yeah. I mean, I have done that sort of thing before, and when you can get it to look right, it works very well, but it can also just be way too much of a pain to try to anchor off properly. Now, one of the things I'm doing is, you see me rotating around to the point where probably one or two of you are starting to get a little seasick, is I'm paying attention to the height of the knuckles, because if you take a look at your own hand, most of you will probably notice that your middle knuckle is going to be your largest. So it'll be your middle knuckle, and then your index, and then your ring, and then your pinky. With variation. I mean, there's always outliers. I mean, well, my pinky is my biggest knuckle. And it's like, well, you probably broke your hand at some point, but, you know, stranger things. Oh. Okay. Clean that up a little bit. Faces, extrude, scale. And you have to do them each individually, because as far as I know, no software companies come up with a way where I could grab all the knuckles across, or all the faces across the knuckles, and extrude them all at once, but have the software magically know where I wanted the separations to be. have wished for it more than once.
And actually, it's those sort of tiny little details of modeling, how you go about, literally how you go about selecting patches of your model, that you'll get used to certain situations, you'll realize that you need to select every other thing, and then to get it to do what you want. Or you'll need to, bridging's a good example, because oftentimes it's a bit pernickety about that. But if you do select two opposite edges and just add a face, the rest will bridge quite happily.
Do it, say stuff and things.
Words.
Yeah, there you go.
I was actually heading for.
All right. Either way, I knew what was happening there. I was all over it. I'm going to back the knuckle up here because I feel like it's already starting to snake too far down the finger.
I've just been completely horrified by something I've seen in BuzzNet.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, Lozo87 said well, there's about 4 things I'm horrified in this sentence about, but I did sci-fi module in my university degree, and we had to study Demolition Man.
Well, that's an interesting topic to go into. I mean, it's not like the story was particularly original. It's playing off a lot of things. It does a lot of playing off of Brave New World.
Does it now?
Mm-hmm. Oh, think back to the names of the characters. The chick was Lenina Huxley. Come on.
Oh, okay. I have to confess, the names of the characters in Demolition Man went on the tip of my tongue.
All right. Let's see. I think we're pretty much to a point where we can call the hand essentially done. Except for maybe adding some more detail around the thumb so we have some nice looking knuckles. But I mean, the hard stuff I think is pretty much wrapped at this stage. So I'll add an edge on either side, just like I did before. Grab this kind of middle edge. Let me go ahead and frame up on it so everybody can kind of see that a little better. And on the underside, we'll make an indentation, clean up the geometry around that. And then we can grab the top of the thumb, and we can pull these out a little bit, make that a little bit more pronounced. Kind of pull it out in this direction a little bit as well. Pull these forward to offer a little more thickness for that knuckle. Okay. So I'm thinking that's looking pretty good. So let's go ahead and take a quick ready check break. Alright, so we've got our hands essentially done. Now you can spend all kinds of time tweaking out various vertices and making this look a bit different. I mean, I could already see where I could clean up this little seam here and kind of poke that underneath, pull this back out. But I'm going to try not to get too terribly carried away in all of that right now. Instead, what I want to do is switch back over and show the rest of a character, which we just hit Alt-H to bring that back. We just hit it by tapping H. And let's see about creating an arm. Now, when creating arms, there's a thing. Now, I've done this before too. I'm not going to say that it's a bad thing, but there's this kind of desire, I think, to just grab like a couple of different edge loops and just, try to fill those in. But I would advise you not to do that. I would actually start off, and the way we're going to do this is we're going to begin by building a shoulder for the character and get it at least out to where the bicep begins. And from there, we will switch over and probably just start merging stuff over. But it is a good idea to see what kind of edge counts we have. So let's switch over to edges. 1, let me shade up my view, and we don't really need the smooth version. We'll go ahead and put that away. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. And that's probably not going to be equal to what we got over here. Because we should have, what is it? Is it just 10 over here? It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So I have 12. So we went from 11 to 12. Now that's an easy thing to reconcile, obviously, from 11 to 12. I would just pick an area that doesn't have a lot of detail and probably needs more than it's got. And like right here, W, bevel, and there you go. So now we're going straight from 12 to 12. Now if later on we decide we need more detail here, we will probably end up having to find clever ways to anchor it off, but we can worry about that when the time comes. I wouldn't stress about it right now. I'd worry about that more once we get the head kind of attached and whatnot. So where do we go from here? Well, pretty easy. Let's grab all of these edges around the hole at the arm. Jump over to the front view, and we'll just start with a basic extrusion. And then really it's just about moving some verts around. So let's go back to wireframe view. You want to keep the ones at the armpit fairly close and let your detail kind of start to arc its way out along the length of the shoulder. Now also we need to kind of pull some of these verts up, as you can see here. Doing the same thing we did in the last video, which is kind of feeling the form and doing the bull dance, feeling the flow. And just kind of let things move out from there. I'm going to keep things really tight inside the armpit. Pull this down a little bit. Go back to my edges, check the front view, check the side view. We won't be able to get too much out of that, but we can see that we have some detail here that's going to need to start to come in because we're way wide of where the arm should be. So let me start there, actually. Let's grab, I could start with faces in this case, and I can pull this forward, switch over to edges, grab this, pull this forward. Grab this edge, and probably this edge, and pull those in. Same here. And if I can grab that little edge there, start to kind of pull that in. Now let's check the front view. Obviously, we've kind of tightened things up a little bit too much. But what I'm going to do to kind of fix that is I'm going to take the these two edges here, and we'll jump over to the front view, and I'll start to pull these down. And the nice thing about this is it'll start to kind of also define the shape of the Latismus. Pull that. Thank you. You're so funny, Gavin.
And yet your tone suggests otherwise.
I know, isn't it great? It's like mixed messages. How cool is that, really?
Odd, isn't it?
I know, I love it. I love it. How you can like say one thing, but you say it in such a way where it means something else entirely. Like, good morning becomes good morning. You know, it's like, wow, totally different meaning.
It's almost as if you're English.
I know. Not really.
With your understanding of irony and sarcasm.
I've hung out with you for far too long, probably. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, back to the front view, and another extrusion. Now, this time around, I'm going to start really stretching things a little bit. Sort of feed these back, buy ourselves a little bit more room. And we have obviously a lot more detail on the front of the arm than we do on the back, and that's going to be an interesting thing to try to come to grips with. So what I'll do is just kind of start working some of the detail around a little bit. Yeah, I may end up having to do some clever things with the geometry by the time we get done, but that's okay. That's just part of the game. Just using a little bit of proportional editing to kind of tighten all of this up a little bit. Grab this edge once again. And let's do one more extrusion. And this is the one that kind of needs to become the hole right around where the bicep starts. Pop quiz time. What's the hotkey for to sphere? Who gets the cookie?
I get the cookie.
You didn't answer.
I assumed you did.
Well, I don't want you to answer.
Want me to.
I'm going to see. I'm going to see who can answer here, and then they get a cookie. And if they don't get a cookie, then Gav gets the cookie.
Excellent. 3 different answers.
Control Shift S. I'm not really getting anything out of that. You know, let's see. That doesn't seem to be working. Shift Alt S. Look at that. Looks like Chris662 gets the cookie. Nice try though, Blender. You were all over it. You almost would have got it. But I really do appreciate you guys making sure that Gav didn't get the cookie. I really didn't want Gav to get the cookie.
You forbade me.
I did, but see, you were kind of like the pity backup for the cookie. It's like if nobody else could possibly have the cookie, then we were going to rename it a biscuit and give it to you. I didn't want to have to do that. I wanted it to remain a cookie, and I didn't want you to have it.
Well, yes, because then you only need to cook it once.
Exactly.
Otherwise, it really ought to be called a cook cookie.
Oh, God. See, this is what I'm talking about, people.
Well, that's what biscuit means. Twice cooked.
Uh-huh.
Biscuit.
Mm-hmm.
It's French for cooked twice.
Utterly fascinating.
Actually,
go ahead.
Chris got the more useful answer. He should get a special bonus cookie. He said space and typed to sphere.
Yeah, that's true. That's one way to do it. I just want to see who's paying attention. Alright, back over here, let's see, right click, turn on proportional editing, and just pull this down about like so. Oh, let's not do that, I just right click, that's amazing. I love my 3D cursor. Let's turn off proportional editing, and I'm just kind of cleaning this up from multiple angles right now.
I know we have cookies and biscuits in Britain.
Do you?
Well, we do, but it's just because we have this pathetic need to pretend that we still are an important country, and so we copy America in everything. So generally, if it's a normal size to eat, then we call it a biscuit, and if it's massive, then it'll be an American-style cookie.
They call it American-style cookies?
Supermarkets often do, because they've got nothing else that they can properly call them.
Yeah, okay. Well, there you go. American-style cookies it is, then.
Well, we do have Maryland cookies.
Maryland cookies, okay. All right. No, you don't have American-style cookies in Australia, but you do have, Tim Tams? Which I think they lace with some sort of illicit drug because they're just amazing. Alright, so get that lined up.
Actually, the ones I do like Oreos.
Oreos are just incredible. Let's just be honest with ourselves. Oreos.
Let's just take a moment.
Let's just take a moment and focus on the amazingness that is the Oreo cookie. So obviously, once I got the shoulder pretty much ironed out, my next step was just to make an extrusion that essentially went all the way down to the wrist. So I can use this to go ahead and start getting things attached. No, I don't have Tim Tams in America, unless my friends from Australia send them to me. At least if we have them, I've never found them. Alright, and let's scale in this way, obviously, kind of clean things up here. I'm just getting it close. So that's pretty close. And now, it's just a matter of doing some attachment. Now, we should have the same number of vertices. I'm not going to worry about recounting, because if I'm wrong, it'll just be something we can all laugh about and fix in a minute. So here we are back in perspective view, Alt-M, go to last. And that probably means that I do have some normals that are all out of whack, which is okay. Yeah, for sure. And let's see here. Let's start pulling some of these guys out a little bit. Give myself some room to work. I love the commands that this thing remembers. It just makes me so happy sometimes that I just want to scream and throw my monitor out the window. And I don't even have Windows, so I'd probably have to use my monitor to make a window first, and then hurl it out.
Are you above ground?
I am.
Because otherwise there's a whole new set of issues to do.
Yeah, I'm more or less in an attic. A little loft. Alright, and then kaboom. And just hit Control-N, and that'll just fix my normal issues. Okay, so the best looking arm you've ever seen, obviously. So we can go ahead and just, you know, there's the class, guys. We're done. Merry Christmas. No, obviously. Okay, so now that we've got the shoulder attached all the way to the hand, the rest of this is really pretty easy. It's just a matter of adding in some edge loops, and then tweaking the shape and placement of those loops. So the good news is, all the hard stuff is pretty much finished. Which should make at least one or two of you kind of happy. Let's start off in the front view. I think it's just going to be easier to see what's going on there. And I'll start at the elbow, and just put an edge right here, kind of where we want the elbow to be. And it's a lot of this is just the process that you would expect. We scale it, we position it. Definitely check out the side view, and we would have some scaling to do in this direction, just a little, and then slide it back a little bit. So something about there. And already that's, you know, it's helping a little. Let's go to the center of the bicep. Add one there. Now that, and we can check it in the front view. We're going to have to do something because we don't want it to all be perfectly straight, but there won't be too much change here. We'll just kind of center it up, scale it out very slightly so that we have something. I'll probably have to clean this up. It looks like I'm getting a little bit of a strange indentation, but we'll get to that. Let's see, from here, looks like a bit of centering, so just move it and center it up, and then scale it and use middle mouse to kind of handle that. Whoa, she's so strong. Pull that in. Looks to me like we ought to pull these back a little, probably these as well.
Did you normalize your normal?
I did. I hit Control N.
Right, cool.
And took care of that a few moments ago. Now, just even with the things we have here, we can do a little bit of adjustment. I'll go ahead and leave proportional editing on, but I'm going to lower the radius quite a bit. I'm going to pull some of these down.
Oh, somehow your proportional editing's gone over to the profile of the curve has changed.
Yeah,
if you look
I
at
probably hit,
yeah.
I think it's Shift O, or maybe I think we'll do that, but it really doesn't matter with my my radius being as low as it is. But yeah, thank you. Now, one of the things that I will do often when creating an arm, because I mean, it will just look so chunky for quite a while, and there's just not much you can do about that at first. But we can go ahead and start sort of spreading out our detail so it's not all clustered in any one part of the arm. And really, it's doing a pretty good job now, but you see we get these funny gaps here and there. And I would trace those all the way back and clean those up. And we do have kind of a funny indentation going on here, so just slide that back, clean the surrounding geometry a little. But let me see if I switch over to edges. I don't know how well this will work, but it should work pretty well. Just go ahead and bevel these and pull them down to about there. And that creates some generally nice rounding. Now, one of the things that I will do, because we don't really see too much of this in the drawing, but we can start grabbing like this middle edge here as well as others, and just start adding a little bit of differentiation between the muscles in the arm, being the bicep, and back here to the tricep, and just because you're not really trying to make her look like she's a bodybuilder, but if there's any muscular tone whatsoever, you will see a little bit of differentiation between those muscle groups.
I always get confused. Does the tricep sit slightly higher up?
It does.
Than the bicep?
I mean, on most folks it will. I hate to make like a general sweeping statement about anatomy, because I have so often, since I've been working at 3D Buzz, had somebody tell me, well, you know, on my arm, I
lost a hand in a threshing accident.
Yeah, yes. I have 6 thumbs or something, you know, just something scary. And I was like, well, I didn't mean to discriminate. Have a good day, sir.
I was thinking about a similar thing now, because I was going to throw out a pop quiz, which is which part of the body is the same length as the forearm.
It's your foot, isn't it?
But again, it comes back to the same thing. See? Yeah. Now, you don't get a cookie.
I don't want a cookie. Really, I've seen these cookies.
You just took the opportunity.
Wind, sails, yeah, I know how it works. Sorry, man. It was kind of accidental. I just kind of popped off. Really? I shouted it. I said it aloud, and I said it a little too quickly, so it was premature. And, yeah, well, you know.
Please.
Anyway. So, okay, that's definitely starting to look like a bicep, and you know, jump out of here. And sometimes it will be tricky just to focus on one area. What I would look for at this stage is make sure things aren't flattening out too much, because sometimes they will. Like if you look down here in the forearm, we've got some faces that are starting to look kind of flat. But you know, jump out to your smooth model. Like here, we could start grabbing some of these vertices and pulling them out a little farther, and start creating a little more definition for the change where the shoulder begins. And you can see that over here now. So now I have a little bit more of a pronounced shoulder, which is kind of nice. And then just start making the necessary adjustments. Let's see here. Turn on. Oh, I get it. See, what I got to do is turn on proportional editing, then hit G, and then the tool actually works. Oh, it's nice. So, pull some of this down slightly. And see, at this stage, I don't know, whatever I just did there. At this stage, I really can start to line the smooth mesh up with the drawing just a little bit more, because I don't really want to add too much more detail. And that's how you know it's time to do that. If you've added essentially all the detail that you want to add, and you still have a ways to go to get out to your image plane, then go ahead and start manipulating the cage accordingly. But if you know you have more detail to add, then don't stress it yet. It's too early. Okay, so let's take a stab at the forearm, figuratively. Let's see here. Let me turn off my smooth because it's just annoying me right now. And we'll just start by hitting Control R, rotate that slightly, scale it up just a little bit, jump over to the side view. Wow. Seems to line up almost magically. And I'll go ahead and add one more right in here. Jump to the front view. And let's see, let's scale this down a bit. Jump over here. Slide it back a ways. Control R here, and that's okay, I'll just deal with it from here. Move it slightly. Scale it a bit. Something about like so. Now, even in this case, let me go ahead and just double check how that looks here. That's not bad at all. I would go ahead and add one more edge just for deformation purposes. And because you don't want anything to actually form a straight line, then at this point you could go ahead and maybe just scale that to offer a little bit more curvature. Tug it this way a little bit. Pull it back slightly.
Well, and it also gives you that little bit more geometry to deal with the lumpiness at the front of the palm.
Right. Right, and what Gav means is kind of like as the flesh, the meat of the thickness of the palm comes into play, you now have a few more vertices you can use to kind of make that happen. And I would have no problem with this whole edge kind of slanting a little bit forward to help accentuate that crease where the flesh of the palm begins, but then spreading out as it goes back up over the top of the wrist. That is just fine to me. Something else that I will often do with my characters is see, what we've defined here is kind of like the muscles. And forgive me for not knowing all my muscle groups off the top of my head today, but we have the muscle here at the forearm, and if you take a look at your forearm, now I don't know how much muscle definition everybody in the room has, but the muscles across the back of your forearm are fairly long and pretty even. But across the underside of your forearm, they kind of bunch up as they get closer to the elbow. So what I will often do is take this edge, which we're just using to kind of indent the middle of the forearm, and I will take the center of it and sort of slide it up the arm about like so. Now let me just kind of play with my topology a moment and even that out. And see what it does is it gives the impression that this musculature is kind of bunched up here on the underside of the forearm, just like it is in real life. So if you were to look at kind of like a cross-section or a profile of this edge, you see it kind of slants back toward the elbow. And a lot of this is kind of a personal preference. I find that this looks really nice. I find that it animates pretty well, or very well, in terms of like if you need the wrist to twist and that sort of thing. But just overall, it gives a nice bit of control for where that muscle group needs to go. Okay, so now the elbow doesn't have a lot of detail. We need to kind of fix that. So I'm going to grab this edge and just hit W and bevel that. And then let's pull the percentage down and get that kind of snug. Maybe to about there. And then I'll just add an edge right in the middle of that. And hopefully at some point B-mesh will be augmented so that we don't have to add that extra edge. We can just like increase the number of divisions in our bevel. I understand that should be coming soon. Okay, so with this much detail, we've got a nice opportunity here to add a little bit of protrusion for the elbow, which I will generally slant downward a little bit when the arm is extended as it is.
Yeah, because when you bend your arm, that is actually the top of the forearm bone that sticks out, rather than the bottom of the upper arm bone.
And then when viewed from the side of the arm, I will often take these edges and pinch them in a little bit as they work their way up toward the front, and then flare them out slightly once they actually make it up toward the bicep. So they almost kind of make like a U shape when looking in this direction. Is this the sort of way, the same sort of way for building a game character model? Sure, yeah, you can build a game character just like this. Or you could build a high-res character like this. Well, you could take what we're doing now and consider it to be a base mesh and start to accentuate it or resculpt it, say like in ZBrush. And then...
what is the current... oh, sorry.
Go ahead, please.
I was going to say, what is the current sort of ballpark of a player character figure for a game nowadays? Because I was sort of... last time I checked, it was about 2,500 to 4,000.
Yeah, you can get a lot higher than that these days. I've heard numbers ranging from 8 to 10 to 12, but a lot of it depends on the type of game. If you have a type of game where you're going to have a whole lot of characters on the screen at once, you've got to minimize it. If it's the kind of thing like, I don't know.
Well, I was thinking like Skyrim.
Skyrim doesn't have a whole lot of characters on the screen at any one point. I mean, it can sometimes, and I have noticed even on my beast of a gaming machine that you can make it slow down. But
I've actually had to uninstall the high-res textures.
Yeah.
It's just impossible to play.
Oh, no, those work really well on mine. If I get really, really crazy, like I've had like 4 dragons on the screen at once, and that's when they would blow fire, that would start to make my computer cry a little bit. But
Halo said, I think some FPS Unreal Engine characters have something like 14K.
Yeah. And again, a lot of that just depends on so much of what your intention for the game is. But yeah, you can get upwards of, I'll call an average 8 to 10, depending on the game. Right. But it's like once you start to play with, once you're working for like a studio, the programmers will tell you.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just thinking, it's one of those things like, graphics cards or anything really computing related. Just there's no point in learning what the figure is because it's changed tomorrow.
Right. Now, something else I like to do, just one of those little tricks, is I will take the tricep and the back edge, I'll sweep upwards a little bit. Because there is a little bit of a cleft in your tricep. And it's another one of those things where, in the smooth model, we probably will barely even be able to see it. We might not even be able to see it at all. I just kind of like knowing it's there because there's a chance the specular highlight might just start to show that change in geometry. So it's just one of those kind of personal preference things.
And generally speaking, and particularly with organic, if you're having trouble deciding where exactly a particular loop, the sort of topology should flow, remember the flow of your skin comes down to the fact that it is a substance stretched loosely over muscle and skeleton. Mm-hmm. So think about where it's in tension and where it's relaxed.
Right. Where does it tense up? Where is it tight? Where does it kind of hang? And you can infer a lot just from that. That's a really good point.
And Wolf90 said, and fat, which is true, but in terms of actual... it gets into more sort of animation-related things as well.
Yeah, I'm going to bevel this edge.
Talking about that, so I don't really want to go into a huge...
I'm just going to bevel this edge, and then use this as a transition to getting to that kind of forward slant there. But as you guys can see, really the hard part is just getting the hand done. Once the hand's done, the arm almost sort of takes care of itself. at least in characters such as this. Okay, so let me see. Being nitpicky, because I am, I think I'm also going to bevel this edge here. And pull the percentage way down, and then, come here, you. Let's do an edge slide. Come here. Huh, interesting. Well, let's do it the old-fashioned way. Just to get those a little bit closer. I just want those there for when I start to animate the wrist. I want this edge to handle a lot of the flexing, and I kind of want this edge to be in place to sort of stop the deformation, so not much will deform from this point on. And that's it.
Are you going to do the, are you going to give her a wrist bone? The big one on the back?
A
little finger?
We can. You mean just like pull this out a little bit?
Yeah, that one. I
mean...
I did know my 8 bones in the wrist. I can't remember what they're called.
Yeah. I mean, right-click. Yeah, sometimes this is more pronounced on people than it is on other people.
That's kind of why I was sort of unsure.
Yeah, I mean,
it really sticks out.
I'll throw it out there. I mean, if somebody wanted to make one, really, you've got all of the geometry that you need, and probably then some, to just wiggle a few vertices around and create that. But that's essentially it. That's really all there is to it. Now, all kinds of tweaking aside, because, I mean, you notice that as I look at this from different angles, there are vertices we may end up pulling out or pushing in other directions. That's everything that I wanted to handle in today's lesson. We're going to do the foot and the leg next. We're going to handle the head as the last thing. Probably the last couple of classes we'll take on the head and then any further tweaking that needs to be done. So that's real. Unless there's any other questions, that's actually going to wrap up today's class as I just do a few last-minute little tweaks here on the shoulder. So obviously, guys, your homework for this week is going to be to get to this point on your models as well. So if you've got an ongoing whip, it would be nice to see that updated. And thank you all very much for tuning in, and I will catch you all next week or on Thursday if you'd like to go through all of this again with the other model. Thank you all very much, and have a great evening.
Bye, guys.